So, we're going to talk about conflict, everybody's biggest avoidance. Not everybody's. There's going to be some types who are less avoidant of conflict. But no, most people don't love it. Some people recognize that it's important. It gets problems out on the table, whether you're a team and you're doing something at work, or whether you're in a partnership or within a friendship. Conflict actually can bring people closer together. And people have such interesting feelings about conflict. And you bring all of your baggage of what did your family, how did your family deal with conflict? How did your parents or your siblings deal with conflict? What were the messages that you got about anger? What were the messages that you got about fear? So we all have these different conflict preferences, and our Enneagram style really plays into it. And each conflict style, though, brings something to the table, and they have valuable contributions to make. So what I have found with teams, that it's almost helpful to have there's three different primary ways people deal with conflict within, from an Enneagram perspective. And there's the competency group, the catalyzer group, sometimes called emotional realness types, and then the positive attitude group. The competency group is types 1, 3, and 5. The catalyzers are type 4, 6, and 8, also emotional realness, and the positive attitudes are types 2, 7, and 9. So let's talk about what each one of you bring to the table. So if you're a type 1, 3, or 5, or if you're in a relationship with a type 1, 3, or 5, you are going to notice that competency is a big deal. It doesn't mean the other types don't care about competency, but they're going to really bring this group really brings it into conflict. They want to get feelings off the table. They want to set aside emotion for a while and bring their competency forward to actually solve the problem. Oops, sorry about that. Their strength is in problem solving because they're getting the emotions. So it's almost like, everybody has this limbic brain, this emotional brain, and this center has a real way of somehow putting it on the back burner, and sometimes some would call it repressing it, suppressing it in some way in order to get these problems solved. The problem with this leaving off the emotions off the table is important things don't get surfaced, and they get pushed into the background, and they resurface later as another problem. People may not feel completely heard in your presence if you're in the competency group, and you've probably gotten that feedback, like, I don't want to be fixed. I don't want to know the rational solution. I want to talk about my feelings here. And that can overwhelm your system if you're a type 1, 3, or 5. When people start talking about feelings, it's almost physical for you sometimes to feel overwhelmed. So here, now we have right next door to you the catalyzer group. That's types 4, 6, and 8. These are sometimes called the emotional realness types. They want to get the problems out on the table. And sometimes they can overwhelm or scare other people in the group because people experience them as intense. If you're in the catalyzer group, you're naming the elephants in the room. And there's an intense energy around you in conflict because sometimes you say things you wish you hadn't said. Sometimes you say things and people wish you hadn't said them, because not everybody is as comfortable as you with talking about some of these things, with naming these emotions. But for you tend to lose trust if people are dancing around these feelings. I always tell people, if you want practice being honest, say it directly to an 8. With a 4, talk about your honest emotions. They're going to be much more receptive to you. And a 6 is always looking for inferences anyway. They're always wondering what's not being said. So it's important to say it when you're talking with a 6, to say it with clarity, and also leaving some kindness in there as well. But if you're in the emotional realness type, sometimes your intensity has the opposite desire. You have the opposite effect than what you desire. You're trying to get things out on the table, and you notice that people are withdrawing, or they're getting more they might be getting overwhelmed, and they may be getting more rational. And you're like, oh, come on here, So what happens sometimes is people may not tell you tough things. They may not say some of the emotions because they're afraid of your reaction. So for you, it's helpful to manage how you take in the emotions and recognize that not everybody has the same bandwidth you do for emotional realness. And the following group is called the positive attitude group. And you like to come into a conflict And for you, it's almost like, okay, how can I reframe this in some way? Or there's another way to look at this. Can we smooth the rough edges a little bit so that we can make some sort of, connection, or perhaps keep things in perspective? And let's not get ourselves all, worked up over this. All right? We don't want people to be uncomfortable in the long run, the positive reframes are saying. All right? And a lot of times, if you're a positive reframe type, it's you feel less comfortable when that emotional realness is in the room. Or you feel like if the emotional competency group, they might say some rational things that might hit you kind of hard. Might not feel very connected. It might not feel very caring to you. You want to keep a positive attitude. You're uncomfortable with all of that intensity. And the issue, though, is in your orientation towards positive reframe, others people might feel like you have your head in the sand. You get blindsided by negative events. And you don't understand, how did that happen? Because if you're kind of pulling people all the way, all the time away from some of the difficult stuff, it tends to surface somewhere else. So notice that each one, competency, catalyzer, and positive reframe, each bring something to the table. And what you could do sometimes is practice, what is it like to sit in one of these other conflict styles? Perhaps I could try that. Like, I am a positive reframe type. I'm married to a positive reframe type. And I have 3 children. One of them is a positive reframe type. The next 2, the middle and the youngest, are the emotional realness or the catalyzers. So as we've had conversations, they've been able to say, God, I sometimes felt like I was trying to put something out on the table and there wasn't room for my anger, or there wasn't room for, my bigger emotions. And that was how they were experiencing us. And we're trying to smooth the rough edges. That's our assumption. Oh, we want to make everything okay. And they're saying, it's not about being okay. It's about getting it all out on the table. So, and we didn't have a competency person in the group, to offer maybe kind of a rational approach. So what I would say is all 3 of them are really helpful and can get overused. And sometimes it's helpful to notice the gifts that each one brings. And if you're a team, like I'm working with a team, and they don't have any of the emotional realness ones on the team. So sometimes the tough stuff's not getting said and is not getting out on the table. Okay, so it's helpful to be aware and sometimes to know what's missing here as relates to understanding conflict and what are we putting out there. So if you like this video, please subscribe. Just push subscribe, and as my videos show up, you'll get them in your inbox. You get a notice about those. My website's lesliehirschberger.com. And we've got lots and lots of Enneagram information, and I'm adding it daily. Okay, so feel free to put some comments here to, how do you experience this? Does this feel congruent with your experience? Thanks.